found that when that's the case, we end up with that really weird comb built on them, or they won't draw on it at all. And that's a problem. In a brood box, that's lost laying room for the queen, and in a honey super.
Afternoon, bee herders, and welcome back to RanCan Bee Ranch. We're back in the bee shop this afternoon. Thought I'd take a few minutes this afternoon to talk a little bit about foundation, what works for us down here in Southeast Alabama, and some of the options available to you, and then how we utilize the foundation that we have chosen to work best for us down here. Some of that stems from some recent videos or recent questions I've seen asked on Facebook with regards to foundation and issues some people are having with foundation, namely plastic foundation. But before I do that, let's talk a little bit about beekeepers and beekeeping. If you put 10 beekeepers in a room together, it's going to be very funny, and I promise you in about 5 minutes you're going to have 15 different answers, and 10 minutes later some of those guys are going to change their answers that they've given you already. That's okay. What works great for some people doesn't work well for others. Beekeeping is personal, beekeeping is regional. What works great in Southeast Alabama doesn't work necessarily so good in the Midwest or up in northern climates or in the UK. State laws are different, the environment's different, the bees are a little bit different sometimes, the nectar flow is different, tons of variables. You've got to figure out what works best for you. We've got some visitors dropping in on us. I've got a frame up here with a little bit of honeycomb on it, a weird drawn out frame, and we'll talk about why that happened here in a moment, but the bees have found it and have decided to come in here and rob it out. Okay, so what foundation do we like? We like plastic foundation. We'll talk about why that is here in a few seconds, but we have chosen to go with plastic foundation as our go-to, both in our brood boxes and in our honey supers. Now there's some exceptions to that. I'll get into that in a few moments. So we can use plastic snap-in foundation. I can use the same plastic foundation and cut it into strips using wax, place it in the grooves on the frames here. I can use plastic foundation with plastic frames. Big fan of the plastic foundation, not so much the plastic frames. Too many slots and holes for small hive beetles to hide in, which creates a problem down here in Southeast Alabama. This region of the country plagued by small hive beetles, and I don't want to give them any more advantages over the bees and myself than I absolutely have to. So not a big fan of the plastic frame, but I am a big fan of the plastic foundation. Wax foundation with embedded wire, without embedded wire, works great. A lot of people use it. I have no problem with wax foundation. Well, that's not true. I do have one problem with wax foundation, and that's the time it takes to put it in the frames, to embed wire, to utilize it however you want it. I just don't have that time. I work a full-time job and try to run 100 hives as a side business, and it's just a full-time job in and of itself trying to put wax in frames. So not a big fan of that because of that reason. However, I do use it occasionally. The wooden frames we like to go with are those with grooves in the top bar and grooves in the bottom bar. As you maybe can see that. A lot of different reasons I like that. It gives me options. I can use the wax foundation, I can use my plastic foundation, I can put springs in the frame, or string in the frames, this is just fishing twine, to support comb that I then rubber band into the frame on cutouts and removals that we do. We won't get into that and some of the intricacies of that today. It just gives me the most options available to me. So whatever you choose to use and you find works great for you, fantastic. Run with that. Just be open to other methods and other techniques. So we go with the plastic foundation.
I typically, when the foundation arrives, it has the little snap off corners. You can cut them off or you can snap them off with your fingers. It doesn't take much to remove them. That's typically in 2 corners. If you choose to do that, you want to put those in the bottom of the frame. I additionally cut off the other 2 corners. And those are communications holes and travel corridors for the honeybee to move around on the comb. In nature, the honeybee doesn't have obstructions to travel like this wooden frame. They can move around the comb side to side and around the ends however they want to. This wooden frame sometimes causes a barrier, sometimes causes some issues, especially for queens. They can be peculiar. So I go ahead and cut those corners off. Typically the bees will not fill that area in with comb, and they'll move around on that frame. I found with wax foundation, they typically chew all 4 corners out anyway. So I just give them kind of what I've found they like more often than not. So plastic foundation is really good. Again, this is Man Lake's plastic foundation. If I just order it in its normal state, I don't think it has enough wax on it, especially if I don't use it right away. I keep a ton of foundation on hand at all times, and some of it will set for a couple of months before it gets utilized. And if I found that when that's the case, we end up with that really weird comb built on them, or they won't draw on it at all. And that's a problem. In a brood box, that's lost laying room for the queen, and in a honey super, that's lost honey production. So that's why I always apply additional coat or coats of wax. If you have the wax available, that's great. If not, I recommend, if you're a small beekeeper just with a few hives, go ahead and spend the money on buying the Max Wax Foundation, or whatever vendor you choose to utilize. Go ahead and spend the extra money to get their double coated wax or triple wax or whatever you want to get. But I've just found that they skimp a little bit on that first coat and the bees don't draw on it as well. So I've applied some wax to this, this piece already. Super simple to do. I just take my foundation. I take a chip brush out of my crock pot full of molten wax, and I brush it on. You can use a roller, that works really well. I just don't have one right now. We'll just brush it on. And how I do it and how much I apply honestly deals with how much I have on hand. Nowadays is typically plenty. So boom, there we go. We do that to both sides. We snap it into the frame. The bees draw on it a lot faster. Keep in mind that wax building, you're talking about a bee who's 6 to 12 days after emerging from a cell. That's when they're at their peak. So you need a lot of bees in that age bracket, although the older bees can do it too. You need a lot of bees in that age bracket to build fast, and you need a strong nectar flow. Or you need to be feeding. I don't want to get too much off on a wild tangent here and start talking about that, because there's some crazy stuff that will happen there as well. All right, so we like plastic foundation. We apply additional wax to the plastic foundation. I don't think you can put too much. The bees will move it around. But I certainly believe that there can be too little on it. So that's what we do here at RanCan Bee Ranch. Whatever works best for you, roll with it. Again, don't fall in love with your plan. Bees are like children. You can't train them, and they're going to do what they want to do a lot of the times anyway. So until we get another video out to you, enjoy beekeeping. Have fun with it. Don't let it become a job like I did. And keep on keeping on.